Okay, welcome everyone, and thanks for coming along to our seminar today. My name is Scott Kerr, a partner in the corporate and intellectual property team at Harper McLeod, and I know some of you have been coming to a few of these seminars which we've been running. Today we'll be looking at structures of the of how bands and different groups can be set up, and some of the issues which you might need to address to sort that through. Just to set some housekeeping rules, if everyone could mute themselves at the moment, it's just to avoid any feedback as that comes through just now, but please feel free as we go through the process to just raise your hand, or if you wish to be unmuted to ask any question at any time. There will be time at the end though for full questions and answers as we go through the whole topics of the seminar. My colleague Chiara is working on all the technology here, so she'll be sorting out slides for us so we can share a screen and see those as they come through. I'm afraid I'm not that technologically up to speed in all different systems that we're using at the moment. Just some housekeeping as well. If you do hear a fire alarm, it will be your own, so please do leave your building. We will understand that completely. And if I hear a fire alarm, I will be leaving very quickly and the screen may go blank, so apologies for that. One other point, I will apologise that occasionally I seem to be having some Wi-Fi and connection issues. I have the issue of 3 teenagers doing homeschooling at the same time, and if they're all on Teams doing that, we sometimes do get a poor signal to cater for the fact that it's live, so YouTube. If that does occur, I may put my camera off just to help with the connection, but we'll still have the audio link there. So apologies if I disappear from there at some point. As I said, we're going to start today going through the issues which can arise from being in a band and some of the questions you may have as to what you could do in different circumstances. So Chiara, if you could move on to the first slide, we'll start off with some of you may notice a theme as we go through, but no prizes for working it out since you are all connected with the music industry. The first question we have to address is who you will actually be when you are setting up your band. Now, if you are a sole performer, it's quite easy. You are there on your own and sorting out through what we would refer to as a sole trader. But a solo artist doesn't have the issues which more of you will have to address if you are in a band or working in groups which meet informally at regular, informally without actually having anything put in place and regarding yourself just as sort of almost as a collective in putting that through. Where you are individuals, solo artists may decide to come together, or even sort of, you may come together in different ways to perform specific projects. It may even just be for 1 or 2 songs or 1 or 2 concerts to get together just to collaborate with each other to see how things are going. Now, if you are collaborating, you are effectively creating a relationship for that one project. Now, if that is simply one performance, 1 song you're working together, or working together in a collection of songs, you effectively are entering into a mini partnership. You have a contractual agreement between yourselves as to what is going on. When I say partnership, that is really an association. The definition of a partnership is a group of people coming together with a view to make profit. It's not actually saying you're profitable, and I know the music industry at the moment is facing a lot of challenges, but the idea is that people are coming together to make profit. It is very unusual for anyone forming a band to say, right, we will set ourselves up as a company. Though that can be done. A company limited by guarantee is not for profit. One with shares is for profit, where you're looking to take money out. But that is really a separate legal entity. It has reporting requirements and going on that way. And so I've not come across that process being used. And so the most common arrangement, although you may not realize it, is that you are in a partnership. A partnership does not require a written agreement. All it requires is a group of people coming together and joining together for the purposes of making a profit. Now, if you are just a group who come together for the fun of it, to enjoy playing together, I would argue that is not a partnership. You're really just a group getting there, but you then have issues over who owns what and sorting that through if we're looking at collaboration. That to me is more the collaboration when you're coming together and saying, right, we'll go on with this. We might come together, see what comes out of this session and how we'll take that forward. And that is more a one-off instance. The partnership is where you're establishing the band and moving on. Now, you may have a contract, and I know that the union has actual sample contracts on it, which are available to set up your band and say you are forming this partnership. But it can be formed even if you don't sign anything or agree to it, simply by coming together and performing. If it is for a view of profit, which you will assume you're trying to get a fee from a performance, then you are entering into a partnership. And we would call that a partnership at will because there is no defined term as to what is happening. In your partnership agreement, if you have a written contract, you may then put something in there about a duration, about people being able to give notice or what is happening there. And one of the problems with a partnership at will is that unless you agree in writing that that is a position, when someone leaves the band, that effectively dissolves the partnership. That partnership no longer exists in any way because it was set up with certain named individuals. And unless you have an agreement with everyone in writing that the partnership will continue and you can have people coming into the partnership and exiting the partnership, it would be regarded as a partnership at will, and it then just stops. So you effectively have almost like a liquidation or a winding up of the partnership every time there is a change of lineup. That's why we'd recommend that there is some form of written agreement, just so that there is a record that the partnership will continue and that you will have an ongoing relationship. Those continuing with the band will have that continuity with ownership of what is in the past and any past recordings you've made and anything which has been written there. And that's one of the important things which we'll come on to later, looking at who owns what and how that is sorted out. So the important things to take away from this is that you will be in a partnership, even if you don't realize it, if you haven't written anything down. But because nothing is written down, that could cause you problems later on if there are any changes in lineup and falling out over those points. If we could go on to the next slide, Karen, that'd be helpful. Right. And this then builds into the question of who owns what, the copyright in what you are creating. Now, as you will all know, copyright is automatic. It simply exists when something is created. But in a song or performance, you have to actually look at the different elements to see what is there. And the three aspects you're looking at, the first is the lyrics. Now, that will be owned by whoever has created the lyrics. You may have one person within your band who does most of the songwriting and they will do that, or a lyricist or concentrates on that, someone else doing the music, or it may be a collaborative effort. Where it is collaborative, you're all working together, you're coming into this idea that it is owned by the band as a whole, this partnership in sorting it out. But let's say only one or two of you, or maybe one person takes the lead on the lyrics, that individual will own the lyrics in question. The famous ones, of course, being Lennon and McCartney in the way that that is put out with the Beatles. You don't see it being owned, any songs being referred to as copyright of the Beatles. It's always Lennon and McCartney as that goes through. The music, again, is completely separate from the lyrics. It is not, because they're not sort of usually coming together in one at the same time. They're created separately. So it can be a completely different individual or a different combination of people who create the music. And they will create that separately from the partnership, the band, unless you have an agreement which states that anything they create connected with the band is owned by the band. So the individual lyricist or the individual composer will own the rights in that individual song, which could vary from song to song within your band. We then go to the separate issue of the recording, and that is a completely separate copyright work again. it is the person who arranged the recording and put the arrangements together to make it who actually owns the recording. That may be a label, it may be the producer, it could be a number of people, it may be if you're doing it all yourselves, you're actually getting in there, hiring the room, preparing that, then that is the band itself, again, who has made that recording. So it could have that itself. But you may have entered into a contract, and so your label may actually have all these rights sewn up. It will depend what is written in the contract. Ownership of copyright. People can say, well, I'll give that to you, you can have that, that's okay. But technically, the legal position is that copyright can only be transferred by a contract, which is in writing. So you do need to have something down there. If you're not following that standard procedure, which is the person who creates it, who owns it, then there needs to be something in writing to state otherwise. But if that writing does state otherwise, it will take priority if there's shown to be agreement. Again, the major issue which could become a difficulty for you isn't what happens if someone leaves the band, which we'll come on to later, and how that's put in place. Duration of copyright is quite straightforward as we look at that to sort that through. And we have the issue of how that will come up in if you have the written contract, for the lyrics and the composition, it is 70 years from the date of death of the creator, not 70 years from creation, but 70 years from date of death of the lyricist or the composer. So your copyright is going to last for quite some time. I know someone has raised a point on what we'll be covering in copyright, and I can confirm the person who's raised that question. We'll cover these issues as we go through that, to sort that through. For the recording, it is 70 years from when that recording is made, assuming it is made public. So you have a 70 years, so you still have 70 years. Recordings from the 1950s are now going out of copyright now, but because we've got different rules for older issues because the rules did change, but the current position, and since 1988, so I'm saying current, it's been there for quite a while, is that it's 70 years from date of death. So there is a long time to sort that out. Someone has raised the query regarding public domain and anything which is put out there. It is important that you actually work out what is public domain and what is not public domain. Putting something on the internet is not public domain. It's simply publishing it and making it available to the public. There can be things which are referred to as effectively open source and putting that through. And this applies not just to recordings, but anything which is available. Unless it's stating this is free and available for use, that is absolutely fine. But sometimes, even if someone is making it available and saying this is entirely up to you to do what you want with it, you do have to read the small print to check exactly what they are giving you in that. It's more an issue, particularly with what is referred to as open source software, where some of the larger, Google, Microsoft, particularly, and Apple also will put some issues out on open source, which means you can use it as you like. To sort that as we go there, and someone said older. We've got the comment there from older items. They're in the public domain in the sense that they're out of copyright, so you can do what you like. If someone is saying it's free to use, you have to be careful that when they're saying free to use, they mean that you can do anything you like with it. Because certainly if it is put out on a basis you can use it, it may still be it is only for personal use and not to make any money out of it. So they would allow you to. Someone may put a song up saying this is now available for performance. You're maybe allowed to perform it, but you might not be allowed to record it if there's a restriction there. So you have to be careful on that. For items that are out of copyright, you can basically do what you like with them. The issue you have to be careful about here is that particularly with music, there could be a new arrangement of it. So if you're looking at traditional items, then you're going back to the original compositions, and you can perform those, you can record it, they are out of copyright, so you can do what you like. But if you then take a traditional piece of music or an item which is out of copyright and rearrange it and make it available for, and you write that new composition down, then although it is the original is out of copyright, you have created a new work. The new arrangement is your new work, and you then have the copyright in that. So just because it is something old, when you see something, if it's, for example, an arrangement, you have to check when that arrangement was put together, unless it is there. Now, usually there may be the small copyright symbol, the C in the circle. It's not essential for that to appear for someone to get copyright in their work. The reason that exists is that there is an international treaty which states that if somebody puts on the little C symbol in the circle and the year of creation or publication, then they get the rights in a different country, if they're a signatory to the international treaty, which a local resident would have in that work. So, for example, most of the EU has sort of quite standard the 70-year rule, which is going through things. But if we look at, say, the Far East, there may be some countries there where the 70-year rule is not 70, it might be 50 or going into different things. If you have that copyright symbol there, that's showing that you're claiming the copyright in your home country. And so if you create it in the UK, you've got the UK copyright here. But let's say in the Far East, let's say Singapore, you would have whatever Singapore would have in trying to sort that through in the copyright materials there. But by putting the C symbol, you are effectively stating your claim to say you are making it clear that you want those rights in that different country. Comments being raised on issues relating to session musicians, etc. If they are brought in, again, you have to be careful. They're being paid for their work, if you like, to say, right, you're coming along and performing, you're joining us just to help us out on this one track or one recording. In that case, I'd regard their position as more as an employee or commissioned. If you have something in writing with them, ideally to say, acknowledge they don't have any rights going forward in the recording, and they give that up to sort that through. If you don't, you would have what we'd refer to as an implied license to use their rights going forward to sort that out, because they're being paid for that one-off performance. They're not part of you coming together to perform as the band or however you're putting it together. But it is helpful if you don't have something for them to sign up to saying we acknowledge we have no rights beyond the actual payment we've received and we waive all rights. If you're not going to have that, have some form of trail, even if it's just an email trail. And it will be difficult because a lot of people would do it perhaps even on texting or WhatsApp. But if you can have some record to show how that was agreed to sort it out. Because if there's a dispute at a later stage, especially if you have someone will suddenly say your recording suddenly has value, they can see the possibility of fees coming out of that. That may be when you have an issue and someone's saying, what is going on? I'm now wanting to try and claim my rights. I don't remember ever signing anything. And that's when you have to argue about what are implied rights and what the people understood when it was all set up. So if you can, look at, just keep that sort of trail hidden away somewhere to show what you're doing on that side of it. Go on to the next topic here. Right. Who gets what? Well, this is where we actually get down into the nitty-gritty, and this is when it starts getting, people can all be quite happy and get on with each other, but when it actually comes down to the money, that's when it can become a little bit more fraught as people start arguing about what is going to go on here. You have to decide where the income is going to go from the different sources which you will have. Now, the sources of income you may have are performance fees for actual gigs. You may have income from sales, and then you have to look at where those are coming from. There may be a management contract where someone is taking on the arrangement that they will deal with it for you, and that will set out what commission or fees they may take on that. They would set out a different range of things to sort that through. If you don't have that, you may just be trying to agree that you would share things out among yourselves. Now, here there can become an issue if we start getting into the questions, and it's where it's difficult to have something down amongst yourselves as to what you're agreeing. If it is a performance, if you're all sharing that equally, which would be the presumption. But if there is something which then goes on to recording, is the lyricist claiming a higher right from the recording because it's their lyrics? We're going back to these copyright issues. Is the composer trying to claim something? Who gets what as to what you have from that recording? Again, you may be thinking of opening up a bank account. That can be tricky because you are, if you're just coming together, you may not have, you won't have necessarily, even with a written agreement, it's particularly difficult at the moment to open bank accounts to try and sort that out. And you may get the bank manager or whoever it is trying to do it online saying, we don't understand who you are. So you may end up having to have a bank account opened in the name of one of your members, saying they regard that as the band's bank account and not their own bank account. If that is the case, get them to write down something acknowledging that is the case, to actually say that this is the account you're using for this purpose. It's perfectly possible to do that. They can make it very clear they're effectively holding it in trust for the band, so it's not their personal property, which allows you, if there's any insolvency that or bankruptcy, that gives you protection against those assets. But also if they're dealing with it for them personally, it shows you the basis that you can say, hang on, these were band, that was band fees, band income. You've been dipping into the account for personal costs, so we need to have that openness there. Again, I think most of you, if you are working with an account, will do it on the basis of an individual simply because of the problems in getting that account open. But if you can persuade them a bank otherwise, then you would argue that you're setting it up as a partnership. But then they will probably want a copy of the partnership agreement and different things as that goes through. Again, shares, you have to decide who is getting what from performances, from individual songs, how that is going through all those different aspects. And this is where we build on to actually putting things in writing and having a contract to sort that out. If you are looking at putting in place some form of management contract or anything where you're giving rights to anyone dealing with your band assets, your copyright, the three key things to consider are the duration of the contract, what will happen, what will be done during it, what is going to happen, does it apply to arrangements put in place during the term, if it's for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, can you renew it or will it automatically renew? And then you have to think what will happen at the end of it. How will that unwind? If you're giving someone the right to record a song and you say they can do that recording at any time, perform with it for 5 years, what if they go beyond that and actually then make a recording within that 5 years? They would still get the rights for that going forward after that 5-year period because it is then their recording. Those things to look at. Excuse me. Exclusivity is important to note. Are you giving someone the sole rights to deal with it? It deals with the copyright aspect, but also relating to management and other aspects. That then means you can't do anything other than with that entity that you've entered into the contract with. If it doesn't state exclusive, it could still be deemed to be exclusive if the parties expected it to be. So if you want it to, it is better to state non-exclusive if that is what you mean. And then finally, the territory and the sector. Now this comes into dealing with things such as, is it only limited to the UK? Is it Europe? Is it the whole world? Is it English-speaking nations? You can consider those restrictions if you're giving someone a right to perform or you're getting a license to do it. And again, sector, is it in, are you allowing someone to perform in small venues? Is it got to be within a certain, or is it only online recordings to allow people to do things on YouTube, but not to do it on, or only live performances? It's those sort of things which we'd be looking at. So duration, exclusivity, and territory are the three key things to think about when you're looking at any contract to sort that out. How money is paid and how it's and what those shares are of course very important to sort those through, but people tend to focus on these because they see a number and it's important for them, and they can forget about these other aspects which are important to go through. I'll go on to the next slide here. What we came back to at the beginning was I was making reference to the risk of a change in lineup on that. Now, again, if you're a solo artist, there is not so much an issue to sort that through. When you're putting that together, you will own everything effectively because it is you. But as I said, you may collaborate with someone on that. You're on an individual project. It is what you're agreeing for that project will occur. That may be writing along with someone. You then have to decide who owns the rights in that. The assumption would be that if there are two of you involved in something, you will own it equally. You would have a 50-50 share. That could be two of you combining on the lyrics, could be two of you combining on the composition, could be two of you in the performance or a recording. And unless you've got something to the contrary, that will be the assumption. Now, where you could end up with a bit of an argument there is that, excuse me, let's say you are creating the lyrics and that is it. One person suggests to you, why don't you change that line to say this, and you take that on board. Will they regard themselves as having been involved in the creation of the lyrics because they've given you that one suggestion? It may have been rather off the cuff. You may have thought about it. It may have been something you've been thinking about already. But that opens you up to the possibility of someone claiming they have some involvement in it. And if you don't have anything written down to say otherwise, if they can establish involvement, it would be assumed on a pro rata share. So you would, if there were two of you, it would be 50-50, three of you a third each. So I am going to harp on an awful lot about putting something down in writing. An exchange of text or WhatsApp is sufficient if there is a record of it somewhere and you can actually show that. But it's those sort of things where issues can become messy later on. And as lawyers, we love a mess. It's the best that you can get, the best gift you can give us to say, right, we're really not sure, or we just got on with it and no one really knew what was happening. It depends, but we can sort of, you in one sense, you can rub your hands, say, great, it'll be a nice big dispute, go on for a while. But at the other, you can be tearing your hair out, saying, this is something where the value of this is going to be completely outweighed by the cost of disputing it to sort that through. So if you can, take care and have something written down at the time. Change in lineup can be a major problem for you if we don't have some form of written agreement saying that the band will continue as a partnership in its form with the majority of the band. As I said, if you have nothing written down, if there is a change in your lineup, you'll be deemed a partnership. One person leaves, that is the end of that partnership. You had come together. You start again with a completely new partnership. But actually, it may just be that one person is left and you're one down on what you had. It's not necessarily that they've been replaced. They may have been, but they may not. If we go back to our issues of who owns rights in the songs themselves, it's still the original lyricist, it's still the original composer. Those haven't changed and they won't change. Where there might be difficulties for you is if it's the lyricist or composer who leaves and suddenly turned around and said, well, you were only allowed to perform that song while I was in the band. It's no longer, I no longer give you the right to do so. Again, if there is nothing written down, we're in this issue of, could they be right? Was that correct? What did the people mean at the time? There is no definitive answer which we can give you. If it came to a court argument, it would be what did those involved believe the case to be based on the way that they acted. I think especially where something had been recorded, I think there would be a strong argument that the band retained the right to continue to perform it, effectively as your back catalogue in future performances. So I think that would be seen as more normal and the sort of standard which would be applied, but it opens up to those issues. Rights and recordings are more difficult because at that point it was a particular lineup which was involved at the time of the recording. And there they will continue to be those people who actually were in that recording, who took part in that, who will have the rights and ownership in it. So any repeat fees, you have to think where that is coming through. So if there is a change in lineup, the new person coming in will not have the same rights in the old recording. What you have to consider is if you have any income from those old recordings, will that person think they should still get part of it because they're part of the new lineup? And they'll argue, because I'm still performing that with you, that's why you're still getting sales of your old recordings, because I'm helping promote those by promoting the new sound, if you like, and sorting that through. So again, if there is a change in lineup, it is helpful to put something down in writing just to avoid what is going on. Now, at a dispute at a later stage. If you have started out from the beginning, there can be issues where it's implied rights. You can say what the parties intended is clearly shown from the way they put it, that they've acted. So if in practice there is income coming in from a recording and you share it out in a particular way, and the new person doesn't get a share of that, they can't come back after a year and say, oh, but by the way, I'm now objecting and saying I should do that, because it's shown that they've accepted that by custom and practice. But again, that is always the fact that we are having to go on the back foot and saying this is what we meant, this is what we understood, rather than having it in writing from the beginning. Next slide. Right. Again, we've got this issue. We thought about the issues in the name of the copyright, in the lyrics, composition, and the performances. But what about the name of the band? Who owns that? Again, if there is nothing in writing, when a band, one member leaves, that then becomes the end of that partnership. There is an argument that the name has effectively gone to sort that out because the partnership no longer exists. You're starting from scratch. There is no agreed continuity. It's probably not going to become too much of an issue where it's only one person who leaves and the majority are still sitting there and still performing. But if there is a larger split, then we have the issue of it being some form of argument about who is allowed to continue with the name. And in particular, it's become more of an issue where, let me say, retired performers decided it's perhaps time to come back and open that up, but the lineups may have changed. And we all know of issues where someone has come back 10 years later and suddenly there's the argument who still has the right to do this. And you have all these, you have the original, you have the real, and all these different combinations with people claiming it. Ideally, you have an agreement which says the partnership, the band, the majority will continue with the name as that goes through to avoid that issue. But if you don't, then we've got that concern. You could consider trademarking the name, and that it's unusual until you're actually getting a bit more well known to sort that out. And trademark. We have the issue there of the trademark is owned by whoever has registered it at the trademark registry. The first to register gets that. There are costs involved in that. A trademark registration would probably be about £750 with filing fees. You're probably talking in VAT. You're probably talking round about the £1,000 mark to get everything put in place. And again, you've got that issue of who owns it anyway. Are you registering in the name of an individual or in the name of a band, which can be a partnership, and then if the partnership changes. There are all those different issues from it. Former members can keep claiming they have some right to it unless you have something down in writing to state otherwise. Someone's raised a question there. Say that ownership of recording is where someone is no longer with the label and sorting that through. And yes, that is where something is recorded. Ownership does not change. It is left with whoever owns it at the time. You can't, and it won't expire, and you can't claim it back. So if you have signed up to something, it's concerned where a recording, the copyright is owned by a third party in a recording. They decide what to do with it and sort that through. You have no right to force release of anything unless your contract gives you that right to sort it out. There are, in the same way, if you think of things that there's often the concept of, if we look at patents, which are another area of intellectual property and technology, a lot of people, and we know some of the larger players in the technology markets, I won't name them, but they're the very large ones, actually will buy up patents from small inventors. Now, that is not because they think that it is something which will help them or take that forward, but they actually see it as value to say, we will own that patent, and then we will do nothing with that technology at all. Because we think if we did, it could prejudice what we have in the current market. If they think it will do them harm, they'll just hang on to it. Put it in, effectively lock it up so no one else can use that patent, because they could take steps to enforce it against a third party, but they don't actually need to use it themselves. They just want to stop other people doing it. In the same way, unfortunately, with copyright, once someone has the ownership of it, they can stop anyone else doing it. We'll come on in a little minute to infringement and what would happen there. So we go on to the next slide, that may cover the topic there. Slight delay, we'll just wait for that one coming up. Yeah. And let's look at this. We'll cover off firstly the claims by ex-members as we're going through there. As I said, one of the issues there is a question of copyright, who actually owns it if someone is claiming it. Another issue, royalties, what do you actually have? If they're getting it from performance rights, from recordings, who is getting that? And you have to have some record to know what that individual share will be as they go through the different stages. There is always a risk that someone comes back and says, I should have been entitled to that. I want my share of it from the past. And they may try to look for that cash coming through. One of the issues, they probably won't know how much that you're actually getting from it. They will have no idea of what is actually coming through in royalty streams or from anything which is sorted out there, because you as the band will continue to receive that, and it'll be up to you how you distribute that and put it out to other people. That may result in some tension if people feel that you're deliberately hiding things and sorting that through. And so that's why it could be helpful to maintain good relations, if at all possible, with people who leave. If someone is very persistent on copyright issues, they could try to seek a court order to prevent you from doing ongoing performance or doing anything there. It's less likely in recordings because there'll be something to show who owns that. And they might want to try and obtain an injunction to stop you doing that. A court order to say, stop performing this because I own the copyright, I don't give you permission. They would be unlikely to get that, but what you can put in place is something called a caveat, which is an order with the court that if someone tries to get a court order against you on an urgent basis, the court is obliged to let you know that an application has been made, which gives you a short time to actually try and get your arguments before the court, before it's heard. In most cases, such court orders are unlikely because the courts will only grant them on the balance of reasonableness, and where they think that damages would be an appropriate remedy, they won't necessarily stop you from doing something. So if you think that if you believe that someone is infringing your copyright, and let's say they're going to make a live performance, and you know they will play it, your remedy is more to get a damages claim against them than to stop them performing altogether, because they would say you could still obtain damages later on. So a court order is not always that is quite difficult to get in those circumstances, but it could happen. I'll go on to the next slide here. How you get the help. Now, the issues where it may become, in addition to the copyright issues, is in relation to names. If you feel that someone is using the same name and there is now confusion, which is called passing off, where one person you may be thinking that because they are still using that name, people will assume it is the original band which is performing and sorting it through. Similarly, there may be the issue of domain names which are registered, Twitter accounts, all those different things which may include the name of the band or give some indication that there's a connection there. As I said, in those circumstances, If you think that is causing ongoing harm and there is confusion in the minds of the public, which doesn't need to be the public at large, it could be quite a small group to sort that through, then you could try to get the interdict to stop that, where you can show that damages would not be an appropriate remedy. Now, that may be if, for example, we're looking at the case of people turning up at a performance thinking it is you and it's not because the lineup has changed, that sort of thing, where you think that could affect the goodwill and reputation of the existing band. We would look at the threats of those and how that could be taken forward. Because you are not a company, we've looked at the different structures which can be put in place. It's got to be remembered that all of you have personal liability. There is no limited liability which a company gives you. So even though you are in a band, it's a partnership, it has a separate entity. If someone makes a claim against the band, ultimately you personally are guaranteeing it. So you could be liable if there is any claim for your personal assets as opposed to band assets. They're regarded as one and the same if the band cannot cough up. So if there was a claim against the band for an issue for copyright infringement, they said, well, that's fine because the band has no money in its bank account anyway, then whoever is claiming against that could go against the individual members because you're effectively guaranteeing the liability of the band. Next slide. If we end up in court, it's going to be costly. Sorry to say, the lawyers will make more money than you, and that's me saying it, not you. Unless it is a very, very lucrative recording contract, a very well-known song which is generating lots of royalties, going to court over a small issue is not going to be worth it. The timescales will be several months to sort it out, and that's without any issues we have from lockdown delays. And the costs, you're looking at tens of thousands to get things sorted out if you're having to deal with it. What you hope is that people will see sense, realise what would be involved, and that a quick lawyer's letter will be enough to put someone back in their box if you have things to try and sort that through. If that is not going to happen, mediation is another way of approaching things to try and get people just talking around a table with, it can be better if it is someone you both agree on, but if not, you can actually go with their professional mediators whose job it is just to try and make people talk to each other and help those conversations and be a bridge between it. Certainly, if it is a valuable, if the royalty stream is there, it is worth taking and moving all the way. But if not, beyond the letter stage, it's going to be more costly on all those issues. So I think there the advice would be, as much as possible, get things written down so you know the position, you have some record which you can refer back to and say, this is what we understood the position to be at the time. It gives the lawyers a much easier basis for making any claim going forward, and actually can help draw a line into things more quickly if you have what we call a silver bullet of something which actually shows what the other person is claiming is not correct very easily. Next slide. It's question time. I'm just checking the chat very quickly to see if any more have been raised, but certainly very happy for everyone to come off mute as there's more general discussion. If I've not covered anything, there's anything else you'd like to discuss. Yeah, Tommy, I think the comments you make there and passing off, I think that is absolutely correct. It can be hassle to try and get it sorted out, but well done that you got it back and sorting that through to deal with it, because it can be very hard when you suddenly find that someone you're left feeling they're taking all the benefit of your goodwill and trying to sort that through.
I'll phone you after. As soon as I'm finished. 30 minutes. Thanks.
Sorry, I think someone's trying to speak there, but I can't quite hear. They're away from their mic. Yeah. Right, everyone. Well, if there are no more questions on that, thank you very much for all your time today. Oh, sorry, John, good night.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about arrangements. If I write a song, 100% music, 100% lyrics, and it gets recorded by a third party and they do their own arrangement of it, how does the copyright work on there, and which pocket does it come from?
But in that case, you are the creator of the original, so that is absolutely fine for you. You then have all the rights in the composition, but the arrangement which they have made for their performance, they have the rights in that. Now, what you have the confusing point you have is that you've almost you've allowed them to create that arrangement by giving them permission and saying, right, on you go, here is off you go, make the arrangement to suit your performance, what you need. So you've given them a license to do that. The argument, if there is nothing written down, which would be that while you've given them that arrangement, that it allowed them to make the arrangement, that is for their own performances. Now, if they record that and for themselves, that is absolutely fine, but they then shouldn't be allowed to make profit by allowing third parties to perform using that arrangement. Because what you're giving them is a license of the lyrics and original composition for them to make that arrangement and go ahead. If someone else took their arrangement, even with their permission, and started performing, they'd say, well, hang on, I have the original lyrics and music rights. You haven't got my permission to perform. So although they are performing a derivative work, they still need your permission as the original copyright, as the owners of the rights to the original work.
Right. So when it comes to any royalties, are any of the compositional royalties for the arrangement, are they taken from the recording or label side as opposed to the writing side?
That's where it is all up for grabs as to what you're actually looking for to sort that out. So that is where you have to agree an arrangement if they are going to get any money. If you've not said anything up front, they may argue, well, you gave us the right to make this arrangement and do what we like, and that was your gift to us, or we paid you a fee from the beginning to deal with that. If you don't have anything on ongoing work, on the ongoing rights, then you have the fight in your hands to try and establish what was agreed as to any profit they would make from that arrangement.
Right.
So unfortunately, that again is simply the sort of, if it's not in writing, it's back down to what did people think the parties believed at the time they entered into it.
Mm-hmm. So basically, as a songwriter, or getting songs to bands and other performers, every time it gets a cover, there's an individual bartering involved. Is that the case?
Yeah, it isn't a case you can say, there is no rule that says the lyricist will always receive X% of whatever is down the line. It is up for grabs every time.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Right, Tom, you're asking, you've commissioned an arrangement of the arranger's tune. Obviously, they own the copyright, but who owns the right to sell the arrangement? If you have, the rules changed going back to 1988, and but there are still a lot of people who go to the pre-1988 position and assume that was always the same. Unless you have something in writing, if you commission someone to do something, the creator still owns the copyright, not you as commissioner. It used to be the case pre-1988 that whoever commissioned something received the right to own the copyright in whatever was commissioned. But that was changed, sort of now going back over 40 years, to say that it is still retained by the author, unless the contract states the commissioner gets gets the rights to it. Now, if we think, for example, more in the concept, this is the music industry, but often people will commission a portrait, for example, by an artist. They will have commissioned the portrait, it is painted, but the artist still retains the copyright in that portrait. The person can't then go on to make copies of it. It suddenly became issues where people bought paintings and then assumed they could use them as their Christmas cards or put them on that to get them reproduced in that sense. The owner of something does not own the copyright in it. It is still the original creator unless the contract states otherwise. The only time that is different is if someone is employed. If they're employed, the assumption is that the copyright goes to the employer. But where someone is commissioned, and this also includes anyone who's self-employed because they're regarded as a contractor, that the copyright remains with the creator, not the person making the payment. That's when you have arguments, though, that you are being given a license to use it, to say what you will get the. You can use it to perform, you can use it to record. It was given for you to do what you like with. But we come back again to John's point, on discussing that with John, that if there is nothing to say what the extent of that is, could they say it is only for your personal use, it's not to recover, or we think you shouldn't be allowed to, it was only for live performance, it wasn't for recording, going through all those things. The argument that we would run in any of these issues relating to commissioning is that if I'm acting for the commissioner, I always run the argument, the assumption was it would be transferred across as if we were being given ownership. And that's where starting point to raise that. Tommy, I know that you'd raised your hand there to see if we can unmute there.
Yes, Scott, thank you very much for the informed seminar today. I just wanted to add, hopefully my internet is just as bad as yours with my kids on it too. But I wanted to add that if I wanted to sell the scores on a website, obviously I would have to go into a deal with the person I commissioned so they could get a share of that profit.
Well, again, that is tying into what, if I'm acting for you, I start saying, no, that was actually, you were being given the right to do whatever you want with it going forward, because there's nothing to say that's not the case. And that's where we have the arguments among lawyers. We would say you were being given effectively an exclusive sole license to deal with it as you wish. So you should also be entitled to make sales of that and create profit from it. They would argue otherwise, that wasn't their intention. And that's where we get into the big fight there, because it's not clear from the beginning. And I realized I missed a question there from Alan.
Hello. Maybe I should just say it.
Yeah.
It's really when people from Canada, States ask to play your music. I always understood when you registered with PRS MCPS that there was a communication between the equivalent organizations like IMRA in Ireland, PRS and the equivalent in Canada and the US. So that if someone wanted to record your music there, they would get in touch with their equivalent organization, who would then access the MCPS PRS in the UK, and therefore they wouldn't try and find you in Tierra del Fuego or somewhere. And so that would save having to search you out and find you and ask you, can we use your music? At which point you say, well, £5, £100, £500, I don't know. You know, there's no kind of value you can put on it. You can't assess it. It's a kind of, is that a theory? Is that how these organisations are meant to work, or is it?
To be honest, I'm not too sure about how that would work in practice, but in the PRS is there to be an agency for the UK, so there's no
communication.
It's not with any government position to sort of say, no, we've signed up to some treaty to say otherwise and get that sorted out. It would make sense if they all communicate with each other.
Yeah.
But the PRS cannot grant anyone any rights outside the UK, and they're only looking at performances in the UK. So they would be a way to get in touch with you, but I don't believe they would give any consent on your behalf to non-UK recordings.
Okay, so it only applies to the UK, Jessica. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, Andrew, you've got, I don't know if you're able to comment on that.
I just had a different question, if that's all right, unless anyone else wanted to.
Yeah, surely. Yeah.
I was just curious, maybe it'll be a quick one, but I have always, for the most part, been self-employed. So I've been a sole trader for everything that I do, music, and I do a lot of other stuff which kind of folds into live entertainment in general. So it's just easier for me to be a sole trader. I'm in a few different bands, one of which, when we got signed, we were advised to start a company. So then we were a limited company for a few years and ran all the money that specific band made as a limited company. It all got super confusing. We ended up just dissolving that company. And now all the individual members are just sole traders again. And I'm always doing my tax return as a sole trader, even for that band, which makes quite a bit of money occasionally. I was just curious if I am doing anything wrong there, if that's fine to just be a sole trader, considering that I do several bands, a solo project, lots of other live entertainment stuff, or if maybe not the company was the right route, but we should be calling ourselves something else. I
think the company is the advantage of the advantages of the company are that it's got limited liability, but there are very limited circumstances you're going to have risk on that. The other one is on the fact that it's got continuity. Now, there's a slight difference between England and Scotland. A Scottish partnership has separate legal personality, so can exist on its own. An English partnership does not. It's just a historic anomaly between the two legal systems. So it may be that you're advised by someone with an English background that they wouldn't see a partnership as being actually viable. It's just a group of people coming together. What you're doing, I think, at the moment is absolutely fine. I think would be the common approach, which is there. The important point is to actually have some way of knowing what your arrangements are in each individual band, so that there is something to, if they make a recording, you don't happen to be there on that performance, but you are on other live performances. How does that work, where people are coming in among them? And that's where some form of written agreement is helpful. But as long as if you have that, I don't see there's no right or wrong answer to sort it out. For tax purposes, if you're doing your tax return, technically, I think you are saying that you're in several partnerships, and you should be doing a partnership tax return as well. HMRC are unlikely to make a major issue of it because you're giving exactly what you're receiving from all those that income if you're doing that return. So it's not going to be don't worry about them knocking on your door to say, right, we think that this return is wrong. But technically, it's the band itself should be putting in a partnership return, and the individual members then put in individual returns for each partnership. Unless you've got that agreed with all the bands you're in, you're far better just treating yourself as being just a sole trader for that purpose, because it would muck up everyone else's tax returns if you claimed a partnership and they didn't, and you were saying who you were in partnership with. So unless you've got agreement on that, please, I'd advise against it to sort that through. Another point John raises, whether there's a digital depository for proof of copyright. No, there's nothing. The US does have recorded copyright where you can send things in, but for general use, nothing to copyright just exists when it's created. There is no register, and that is one of the difficulties. PRS is a way of actually contacting, finding out who the owner of the copyright is. But if you just hear something, come across it, you don't know who the owner of copyright is, and it may not actually be the performer anyway. You've got to go all the way through those different lines. So there is no way of knowing, and there is no requirement to deposit anything anywhere. Your copyright is automatic as soon as as soon as it is created.
The main reason for that question is been getting different opinions about sending music to yourself in the post and getting a date stamp on it. One opinion was do it. The other was it's never been used in court, and so it's just an expense.
So, well, people do it. The reason that someone does it is to show that the reason was to have some form of trail to show this shows that I created this on a particular date, or it was there at a particular date because it's in an envelope which is postmarked. Now you can steam it open, you can do all these things to try and sort all those out. So it's not it's not necessary. You can have a Word document saved on your computer to show when the Word document was created. It will show exactly the same information to sort that through. It doesn't prove that you own the copyright. It's just that at the time it shows that is when it was created and that you created it. So where it could give you some protection, but you may have other issues there, is that if someone came to you and said, you've copied my work, you say, well, actually, no, because this is something, and you're claiming that you heard it on the radio and you've copied the melody or something there. You say, well, actually, no, because I can show I actually created this 2 years before your recording was released. So I couldn't have heard it when I actually came up with this. But there are other ways of doing it. So having it posted to yourself is no longer, you can do it, but it's just a record, which is the same as having a digital record to show when it was first written. So if you have something on your PC, something in the cloud there to do that is anything there that's absolutely sufficient.
So it would be so it'd be just as easy just to email a track to yourself in the and have the record of it on in the cloud somewhere.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. It just have a record on that. I know time is going on, so what I'll just to finish up there was I think Talitha, you'd raised the question of someone approaching them to license your work. Just make sure you have something sorted there to say what is they can perform it, they can do that, but if they're going to record it, what rights are you going to have in that recording as opposed to royalty streams? It's just to actually think that through to sort that out. It's nothing essential there, just to think through ahead as to what might be the issues on that. I'm aware a few of you are having to head off to different meetings and sort that through. Please feel free to email us with any further questions or anything that you have on that. Quite happy to answer further queries from you as they come up now or as you think about it over the next few days. My contact details will be available, so just get in touch with any other queries. Okay, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you found that informative. Thank you.